You're watching ChillyBoy Productions. I'm Larry ChillyBoy Chilson, and this is my ranking of Tom Holland's entire filmography. Now, before we get into this ranking, make sure to go ahead and click that subscribe button down below so that you can chill with me on each and every one of my latest videos. Now, as a self proclaimed Tom Holland simp, if you couldn't tell, I decided that with the release of Uncharted, it was time to do a complete ranking of the filmography of one Tom Holland. So I had gone on to IMDb to compile a complete list of all the feature length films he has starred in, giving me 21 total films. And actually, of those 21 films, I had already seen 18 before even compiling the list. So you know, I'm in simp territory. Now, for this ranking, I am taking into account a couple of different factors. Yes, quality of film. The best films are inevitably going to score high. However, I am also taking into account Tom Holland's presence, his performance, and his role, honestly. So if he's hardly in the film and doesn't really make an impact, if the rest of the film around him is amazing, it's still not going to qualify as high as maybe a good film that he gives an amazing lead performance in. And of course, as with all rankings, this is just my personal opinion. This is my personal ranking and my own take on said criteria I just outlined. I'm very excited to hear your ranking for all of the Tom Holland films you have seen down in the comments. Now, without further ado, let's jump in because we have 21 films to get through. Kicking us off at number 21, aka dead last, we have Doolittle. Well, Doolittle pretty much ranks last on both categories. It's the worst film he starred in my opinion, without question. Doolittle was just a weird, very strange hot mess. The entire plot is just a disaster. I did not enjoy Doolittle in the least. And he voices Jip, the intelligent dog. First of all, I thought he was miscast. I really think that role should have went to someone else and he could have played a different animal in here. But second of all, the character isn't really in the film all that much anyway. It didn't show off his capabilities as a vocal talent, which we'll get to in the other voice performances he's given. And the film itself is just trash. So, yeah, Doolittle, easily last place. Coming in at number 20, I have Chaos Walking. Now, as a Tom Holland simp, I'm going to admit it right now. Doolittle is actually the only film of his I don't like. The rest of these I enjoyed in one aspect or another, and that includes Chaos Walking, a film everybody else seemed to hate, but I thought was perfectly fine. It was perfectly fun. Yeah, it was a bit of a throwaway young adult nonsense type of film. Holland was really good in the role. Daisy Ridley was solid, and I thought he particularly gave a convincing performance. Honestly, I just liked it less than the rest of his filmography. So, Chaos Walking ends up at number 20. Coming in at number 19, I have The Lost City of Z. I know this actually might be quite controversial. This film has really strong reviews, and I know a lot of people really enjoyed The Lost City of Z. I just found it to be so painstakingly dull in pretty much every single facet. I thought Tom was really strong in his role. However, I didn't think the character was as deep or fleshed out as it could have been in the writing aspect. I just wasn't invested in this story. It's obviously much more about Charlie Hunnam's character anyway, but I just never be on board with the Lost City of Z hype train. I'm sorry. And yeah, it ends up coming in way down at number 19. Coming in at number 18, I have the current war director's cut. So I don't know what the non-director's cut is because I saw this in an advanced screening and pretty much the only thing I saw released to theaters was the director's cut. So don't really know why it needed that notation instead of just being the current war released to theaters. The film itself is perfectly fine. It's an interesting enough story. Benedict Cumberbatch gives a great performance, as he always does, and this type of historical drama certainly interests me. However, Tom Holland's role is just quite small. He's good, not great, certainly not one of his best performances by any stretch, but it's a perfectly serviceable, if not completely forgettable film all around. Again, at number 17, I have Cherry. Cherry is one of the select films on this entire list that completely relies on Holland as a performer to uplift the entire film. He is responsible for making Cherry work at all, and he delivers. Honestly, this is one of my favorite performances from Tom Holland. He gets to do a very big range in this performance, from really innocent, young, sweet to soldier, more brute and damaged, and then obviously the drug addiction. It's a very layered performance that he gives from start to finish. And if we were just ranking Tom Holland's performances in films, this would be much, much higher in the ranking. However, Cherry as a film is just uneven all over the place. It's really messy. Honestly, I hated the first act. Really didn't like it. Thought the second act was okay and really enjoyed the third act of the film. So it's just such an uneven up and down type of mess to watch. Not to mention the Russos and that direction, giving us very much student project tease, if I'm being honest. So this time around, it's everything around Tom Holland that brought the film down to number 17. At number 16, I have Pilgrimage. This was a film I had not even really heard of before diving into this ranking, and honestly was the last film I watched in Tom Holland's filmography. However, I think it was a really solid flick. It's less than an hour and a half long, so it breezes by. But it stars John Bernthal and Tom Holland as these two people that are part of this monk group going on a pilgrimage to deliver this religious relic. And along the way, religious battles ensue. Tom Holland gives a good performance here. Again, it's not one of his best, and even as a younger performer, as this was released in 2017, so clearly filmed prior to that, I think he had given better performances in the past and has certainly given better performances through to the present. Honestly, I think John Bernthal possibly gives the best performance in the film with no dialogue and less screen time than Holland, but he's good. He's solid. He does what he needs to do here in this role. The screenplay is good, though the characters, I could have done with more. I was reaching for a more epic film in here, and unfortunately it just kind of fell short of that, and that's what keeps Pilgrimage as a whole from moving up further in the filmography ranking. Coming in at number 15, I have Locke. I'm going to be honest with you. I debated on whether to put this film in the ranking at all, because Tom Holland is part of a phone call, basically, when it comes to Locke, and it didn't really require much voice acting on his part. Literally the only human we see in the entirety of Locke is Tom Hardy. This is Tom Hardy's film through and through. However, I wanted to give a good authentic ranking of his filmography. He is credited and his voice does make an appearance, and it's a nice touching moment when he does get to talk to Tom Hardy as his son. However, the reason it's above these other films is simply because I think Locke is a better film than all of these other films. Holland's performance alone and that voice performance probably would have ranked it down at number 20, just above Dolittle, because it's still better than that. But Locke as a film is just a really gripping thriller story that utilizes its resources to perfection. So you're not seeing this one for Holland, but if you do check out Locke, I think you'll enjoy it. Plus, you get to see Venom literally play Spider-Man's dad. In at number 14, I have In the Heart of the Sea. Now, this one stars two of my simp leading men. Actually, my husband and my boyfriend, if you will, Chris Hemsworth and Tom Holland, in a Ron Howard epic about the story of Moby Dick. Yeah, I was so excited to go to the theater and watch this film and left kind of disappointed, in all honesty, because it's such a hollow film. It does look beautiful. A lot of the visuals are grand. It has that epic tone and story and nature, but we just drug along for so long in this film before we get to the actual story of Moby Dick. And the script doesn't do a good enough job fleshing everything out. There's small little flashback type of things. And of course, it's a story of like human survival, but it just fell short to me. If you're going to be this character heavy and human heavy in a story about Moby Dick, I really need to feel, and the film came up hollow. However, Chris Hemsworth in that body transformation was insane, and he actually gives a fantastic performance here. And Tom Holland is amazing in his role as well. The acting, honestly, across the board is fantastic. It just didn't grip me the way that the rest of the films on this list did. At number 13, I have Edge of Winter. Another film I had not heard of until I pulled that little IMDb list to do this ranking, and I actually quite enjoyed it. It's another one of his smaller films that clocks in under an hour and a half. It breezes by, and just gripping about a father losing his mind when he finds out his ex-wife is going to take his children out of country. And Joel Kinnaman gives an amazing performance in this film, maybe one of his best performances of his career. And a young Tom Holland here is fantastic. Gets a huge range, and I loved his character. I loved his performance. I just thought he was amazing in Edge of Winter. It's not all that original. There's nothing in this film really that makes it stand out. And the script isn't amazing, certainly, but it was exciting. It had me invested, and it gives a wonderful Tom Holland performance. At number 12, I have The Devil All the Time. Another strong Tom Holland performance in one of these darker dramas he's been delving into in recent years. Here he is once again as the central focal point of this dark film, and he is more than up for the task. Holland gives one of his best serious performances to date here, really capturing the tortured aspect of this young man and the vulnerability that still lies underneath from the trauma he's dealt with in his life. Much like I said with Cherry, if I were just ranking his performances, this would be much higher up on my list overall. However, Devil All the Time brings a lot of interesting ideas to the plate. It gives us a lot of great moments, including Robert Pattinson just providing a show-stealing performance. But it tries to do too much. We have one too many storylines in here where our attention is just divided amongst all of these little subplots, and they don't converge to a satisfactory collision by the end, leaving you feel a bit underwhelmed when you walk away from The Devil All the Time. Again, at number 11, I have Uncharted. Yes, his latest film, the video game adaptation co-starring Mark Wahlberg. The film, everybody went into expecting it to be awful because of all the delays, all the production issues, the various directors, and I had a really good time watching Uncharted. It's fun, it's big, it's kind of dumb. The CG doesn't always land, but the chemistry between Mark and Tom sell the film, and I had a blast watching it pretty much from start to finish. And what this film does that none of his other non-MCU work has really done is cement Tom Holland as a blockbuster carrying movie star, even without the Spider-Man suit, because his charisma sings off of the screen. He is fantastic as this really energetic, charismatic man leading the film. Once again, it rests pretty heavily just on his shoulders, and those broad shoulders are more than up to the task of holding it all together. In honesty, it's probably not as good of a film as a couple of these that I just ranked below it. However, at the end of the day, it's one I'm going to remember more than pretty much all of the other films that I've ranked so far here on the countdown. So kicking off the top 10, at number 10, I have Spider-Man: Far From Home. The second film in the Tom Holland Spider-Man trilogy to this point was maybe the weakest. That's up for debate, certainly. However, Tom Holland once again proves he is great in this role. He's wonderful as Peter Parker, specifically. He's wonderful as Peter Parker. He makes a fantastic Spider-Man in the suit. Obviously, this is the role that has pretty much defined his career up and through this point. And I would say Far From Home is the weakest film he has starred in as Spider-Man. Not to say it's his weakest performance, because I still think he's great. He just kind of lives and breathes the role. But Far From Home certainly has its fair share of issues that keep it from moving up any further on this list. Coming in at number 9, I have How I Live Now. The last film I had not watched prior to this ranking. This was a coming of age film that pretty much boosted up the stardom of Saoirse Ronan, as well as Tom Holland and George McKay, all starring in this movie. Holland is great, though. He's very young here, his second youngest performance on this list, and he's so good in it. Now, I don't want to give away spoilers if you haven't, but if you've seen the film, you know his character is involved in the most emotional moment of the entirety of the runtime. Yeah, it broke me. But he as a character was so fun. He brought a lot of layers to this little spunky kid who could have just been annoying and there. Instead, he transformed him into something more developed and lovable. Now, the film itself I actually really enjoyed as well. It was a lot darker than most young adult films, and it really depicted some dark stuff throughout the entirety of the runtime. Yeah, it's a depressor, for sure. However, it just would have been so much better without the romance between two cousins. It didn't need that. We could have made George McKay the next door neighbor, and it would have been much better for it, if I'm being honest. And the romance itself, I mean, it obviously plays somewhat of a role, but the film at large would have been so much better if we had just cut that romance out. At number 8, I have Spies in Disguise. Tom Holland's second voice acting performance to make this list. Spies in Disguise was a lot of fun, way better than I thought it was going to be heading into that theater. Both Tom Holland and Will Smith seem like they're having a great time. Holland specifically is perfectly cast as this little character, as Will Smith brings a little bit of attitude and edge to the pigeon he is. The plot is not original, it's nothing new, but it's fun, and the animation is really sleek. The action in the film is well done, and the heart is there. You buy the connection between Smith and Holland as we move throughout this adventure we're on, this detective spy mission that is taking place. This was our first big introduction to Tom Holland as a voice actor, and he killed it. He knocked it out of the park and gave us the perfect performance for this character. Though I would say maybe it's not all that far off from his live action performances. It's a character that fit him well, and he was just a great casting choice. Coming in at number 7, I have Spider-Man: Homecoming. The film that cemented Tom Holland as Peter Parker Spider-Man for the MCU. Yeah, we've gotten a peek before, a little sneak preview of him in this role, but it's here in Homecoming that he shows he was the perfect choice for this universe. This is the Spider-Man film that really showed us the full gambit of his Peter Parker. He's so innocent, so cute, so vibrant and naive in the world. And by the end, he's really developed into that superhero for his community. Getting to see him in that homemade costume, fighting against Michael Keaton and the charged circumstances of their battle at the end of this film are amazing. His character choices are fantastic, and he sells it as an actor. You feel that pain and that conflict in him. Unfortunately, as a whole, I think Spider-Man: Homecoming is really uneven as it's forced into the MCU and made to be this bigger superhero film than I think it should have been. coupled with the smaller John Hughes-esque high school comedy that worked much better, in my opinion. But overall, it was a star-making vehicle for Tom Holland as a performer. It cemented him in his place as Spider-Man, and I'm so glad we got him in this role. At number 6, I have Avengers Endgame. Oh my. Well, I just have to remind you of the criteria. I love Avengers Endgame, and in honesty, if it were just based on the films themselves, this would be much higher in the ranking for sure. However, Spider Man isn't in the film all that much. He's not the focal point of this film. He's not the send off or the introduction that the film is trying to make. We're much more focused on our core group of Avengers and saying our goodbyes to many of those characters. Now, that's not to say Tom Holland's Spider-Man is without his merit here, because he does give a very good performance when he's on the screen. That moment of him just holding the gauntlet and like, hi, I'm Peter Parker. Great. When Tony just hugs him, his reaction is amazing. And then, of course, as he's saying goodbye to Tony, is just a heartbreaking moment. The game as itself is amazing. I know people have lots of problems and nitpick it to death at this point, but I still adore the film. I think Holland is used perfectly within the context. So kicking off our top 5, I have Pixar's Onward, a film that has gotten far too much hate. I don't understand it. I love Onward. Obviously, I have my little Ian Lightfoot Funko Pop over here because I related so hard to the character of Ian Lightfoot. I loved him so much, and Tom Holland brought him to life perfectly. What a perfect casting choice. Yes, this is our 3rd voice acting performance on the list. Well, 4th if you include Locke. But I think it's his best by far. He brings so much range and emotion to this character. He makes him really believable. He and Chris Pratt have a fantastic brothers bond here. The animation, obviously, it's stunning. It's Pixar, and I thought the story was really heartfelt. Honestly, I'm an only child. I don't have brothers to really relate to this, and I was so moved by the end. They got me because I was invested in these characters and their relationship to one another and to their father, and it all just worked for me. Haters, to the left, because Onward makes my top 5. At number 4, I have Captain America Civil War. Our introduction to Tom Holland in the role of Spider-Man, the film that pretty much changed this kid's life when he was cast in the role, and changed my life too. I'm so glad he got the role. Now I'm going to say this. If I were doing a ranking purely on films, just ranking which of the films I liked best, not taking into account this is a Tom Holland ranking, Captain America Civil War would be my number 1. I absolutely love it. It is one of my top 3 favorite MCU films, and it's my favorite MCU film that Tom Holland's Spider-Man has been part of. I adore it. However, once again, he doesn't really have that big of a role. He is here as an added little bonus, a little extra, if you will, and he perfectly encompasses Spider-Man with his role in this film. He's quippy, he's funny, he's having a great time, but as a performance, it certainly doesn't go into as much depth or give him the opportunity to show off his range and acting skill as the 3 films above this do. It's a hallmark film in his career, and it was a great character. And he's certainly one of the 2, I'd say, characters that completely steal the show in this film. And couple that with the fact that I love Civil War so much, that gets it up to number 4, but it just couldn't quite eclipse the fantastic performances he gives in these top 3 films. Again, at number 3, I have Avengers Infinity War. You could say, in accordance to screen time, this is pretty similar to something like Civil War, a little bit more than Endgame, but Not a whole lot of screen time for Tom Holland, but not a whole lot of screen time for Tom Holland by and large here. He's part of an ensemble cast rather than a leading role. But wow, does he kill it in that screen time he's given? Not only does he do everything he's done before as Spider-Man, he gives us the innocence, he gives us the fun quips, the hilarious moments, but he delves so much deeper. Of course, we have the I don't want to go moment with he and Tony Stark, which was improvised and amazing, really perfect, and made his death scene the most heartbreaking of them all. But it's even in smaller details of how he interacts with the other characters. That moment when he is told, "You're an Avenger," like initiation from Tony Stark, the like joy on his face that slowly transitions to understanding the gravity of the entire situation and his new role in it was amazing. He makes really, really nuanced, fantastic choices as an actor in Infinity War. Plus, the film is great. I don't love the fake out ending, and I have a couple of problems with other characters in the film, not Spider Man, but a couple other ones. Their depictions weren't my favorite. But Infinity War is epicness to the max, and Holland gives a worthy performance to that title. In our runner up position, coming in at number 2, I have The Impossible. The first film I ever saw Tom Holland in, way back in 2011, is the Ewan McGregor, Naomi Watts, Tom Holland, starring tsunami disaster drama, The Impossible, which is a drama that will put you through it. It will grab your heart and wrench it. It will put you through that emotional ringer. And a big part of why it's so effective is the performance from a young Tom Holland, who is fantastic in this film. Talk about range. He does it all here. He's so believable. His connection with Naomi Watts specifically, because that's who he's with most of the film, is fantastic. Honestly, this should have cemented him as one of those young talents to watch because he was so good. And he was up against heavyweights in Ewan McGregor and Naomi Watts and easily held his own in such an arena with hefty material. The film itself is fantastic. It's a gripping drama that, as I said, takes you through the emotional ringer, but in the best ways. But it does it without being overly manipulated. You're on the edge of your seat. It's gripping storytelling from start to finish. Yeah, it's slightly problematic in the fact that we're following a white family on vacation rather than, people indigenous to the land. But as a story of human empathy and survival, a story about this family's love, it's so well done and was a fantastic introduction to Tom Holland as a performer. So, finally, my pick for the number 1 Tom Holland film is Spider-Man No Way Home. Honestly, I don't know that it could. Honestly, how could it be anything else? This was the accumulation of all of his work as an actor, both as Spider-Man and outside of the MCU. Me, this is his best acting performance, period, to date in any film, whether it be the dramas that we were talking about, the vocal performances, or his turns as Peter Parker. Here, he takes it all to another level with a really deep, touching, nuanced, developed, matured performance. Specifically, when we get to the final act of this film, it is just a tour de force acting performance, right down to the details. Like I mentioned in Infinity War, he brings them back to perfect use when he comes into that coffee shop to talk to MJ near the end of the film. Oh, heartbreaking. The full story is told just on his face. Whether it be the rage and pure emotion as he's fighting Goblin, slow realization of what has happened at the attack in the apartment, his slow crumble into emotional despair. It's amazing. Even the more innocent, more lighthearted MCU Peter Parker stuff that takes place in the first half of the film, he nails it with ease. Physicality of his performance is on another level from any of the other films he's done. Emotional maturity is on another level. Even as we have all of these things going on around him, we have all of these actors coming in and these beloved characters making guest appearances. Tom Holland stands firm in the center of it. It is his film, and it is the culmination of his trilogy. And not only does the writing and filmmaking do a great job at making sure that's the case, Holland, as a performer and as a movie star, makes sure that that's the case. He never lets you forget this is his story, and that's the story we're here to follow. So honestly, Spider-Man No Way Home is the culmination of his career to this point. Though Uncharted is his latest film, honestly, No Way Home is his shining career moment to this date. And that's why nothing else could be number one on this list. That's it. That is my ranking of Tom Holland's entire filmography. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead, click like down below and subscribe to the channel so that you are always up to date on all of my latest videos. Also, make sure to join in on the discussion. What is your ranking of Tom Holland's filmography? Let me know either in the comment section down below, or you can hit me up on Twitter. I love you all so much for your continued support. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.